Well, of course she doesn't bring up stuff like ratings or toy sales, very much like real life. So yeah, to celebrate the upcoming premiere of Hirogaru Sky Precure and the franchise's 20th, though actually 19th anniversary, we're going to be taking a look at the one-shot for Crimecatch Policure from the 8th volume of the English version of Way of the House Husbands manga. And in case you're interested, this book is readily available at most stores as manga rightfully continues to dominate the world. But yeah, while not sponsored or anything, I would actually recommend picking up this book, even if you're not too familiar with the series proper, as it is very episodic, so it doesn't hurt to drop in at any random point of it. Interestingly though, much of the second season that's on Netflix right now has been using stories from this particular volume, so maybe when they do inevitably release the second part to it, they'll be able to adapt this one shot as well. Please? Well, for now, let's just get right into it. The first page, which would have been the cover to the extra booklet we could have gotten if Viz Media hadn't cheaped out on us. No, I'm not at all bitter. But yeah, color or no color, it's still a very nicely laid out cover, and is even kind of reminiscent of the Kamikita Fudago's work by featuring our obvious stand-in for Erika and Tsubomi posing front and center, while the Itsuki was in the back. Yeah, as if her outright stealing Cure Sunshine's pigtails wasn't a big enough giveaway, the fact that she's in the background is really reminiscent of the treatment most Six Rangers get when they're just being added into the team midway through, which can even be seen in the Policure's quote-unquote anime opening, as she's barely featured in there, and they don't make it very apparent what her civilian form looks like, even though it is actually there. Yeah, we'll get to that, as well as why they probably won't need a Yuri stand-in for this team. Anyway, while Kosuke Ono was credited for scripting the story, as you could probably tell just by flipping between the pages, he got someone else to illustrate this manga. That person being the very underrated Yoshiaki Skino. Some might recognize him as the author of Twin Star Exorcist, though personally, I know him more for Good Luck Girl. By the way, that's a dude singing that song. Yeah, and I bet you thought Aoi Shota had an androgynous voice. But yeah, I cannot express how disappointed I am that no one talks about this really fun little manga about an extremely lucky girl who's stalked by a goddess of misfortune trying to siphon off her luck onto the less fortunate. It's a really funny and even sometimes touching little series that ran for an admirable 16 volumes. One of the things I remember most about it were the many other manga parodies they did, and while some of it was just them tracing over the original panels, likely with permission, as they were all from the same company, Sukeno does seem to at least have a talent for copying other manga style, hence why he was likely brought in for this project. This would become apparent within just the first few pages, as we got the standard monster of the week made from a random object, in this case a tanto, a sort of combat knife used by the Yakuza. I the only one imagining all of these monsters being voiced by Hidenari Ugaki. Anyway, this Yakuzan was stopped by our story's main heroines. They engage the monster and oh my god, the city! Yeah, sorry, Rosemary ain't here to bail you out with his overly convenient little field of deliciousness. Ooh, by the end of this, y'all are gonna get an earful from Ryu-san. This did at least allow the blue named Cobalt Police to do the requisite deadlift scene, which honestly, if Sora does not do at least a half a dozen of these, then she should reconsider the whole hero thing. Though speaking of heroines named Sky, though not with the right color, yeah, it's still gonna take a little while to get used to this whole blue lead thing. Sky Police proved to be just as badass as her partner by doing that old stopping the katana with your hands trick. Yeah, I know the Mythbusters said it was impossible to do with your bare or just gloved hands in this case, but one, this play is a hell of a lot bigger, and two, again, it's just badass, don't ask questions. I mean seriously, while I knew that both Twin Star Exorcist and Good Luck Girl had plenty of action, this is still some impressive stuff, and I wouldn't mind if the Kamikitas outsource some of the stories to Skeno, since they usually don't draw action scenes themselves. Anyway, they defeated the giant kitchen knife with the standard dual cure finisher. This caught the attention of the antagonist of their series, the Yakuzan group, at their HQ, which I think is in some sort of other dimension, judging by how that shelf is just kind of floating in dead space. Which, with actual Policure villain factions, that's not well outside of the realm of possibility, nor are these kinds of characters. I mean, yeah, Yakuza and what they do aren't exactly child-friendly behavior. But one, nowadays they're all but non-existent IRL due to not being able to keep up with the ever-changing world economy. And two, Toei has actually used them in other stuff like Sentai, or at least the Mafiosa. Just saying, if y'all are willing to turn the big corpos into even more cartoony villains than OCP, then I don't see why these Yakuza, who ironically share similar vibes to those guys, should be off limits. Anyway, I also really liked how they had memorial pictures to all of their fallen monsters. It's a unique touch that gives both perspective to how many baddies the Policure have defeated, but it also helps to characterize the Yakuzan as evildoers who do at least pay respects to their fallen brothers like an actual Yakuza clan would. Anyway, after we got a nice glance at the two generals from that opening, we got what I'm guessing is going to be the Pisard stand-in volunteering to finally defeat the Policure. Though at least this dude's not going to be killed off after just 5 episodes. We then cut over to Gumshoe City, where we were properly introduced to our main heroines, Ai Zenigata and Aoi Kenmochi. Going by that heart-shaped hairpin, Ai is obviously supposed to mean love, and Zenigata of course refers to Heiji Zenigata, the fictional Edo police officer created by Kodo Nomura, who would later spawn an unofficial descendant in the pages of Monkey Punch's Lupin III. Meanwhile, Aoi, as we know, just means blue, and Kenmochi is likely referencing the inspector from the Kindaichi case files. Basically, it's a manga series where the teenage detective didn't take a slightly out of place magical drug that turned him into a Shota. And yes, they actually did have a crossover in a DS game once. Anyway, now that we've actually got a good look at these characters, I gotta say, I really like their cops. On top of Scandal just knowing how to draw some really cute faces, I like how their school uniforms are mostly blue because cops. Kinda makes you wonder if Aoi should have just been the leader, but that would just be silly. Meanwhile, their cure forms are just great, and in some ways even better than what we're going to get in the upcoming series, if only because their motifs are a little more on display. I mean, I get that Hirogaru might also be going for an idol motif, hence why they brought in a Love Live designer, and why they use freaking mics as their transformation trinkets, but other than Sora's wing ornaments, there's not a ton of sky motif in their designs, which to be fair, I don't know how you would go about doing that. Here though, along with the obvious touches like the matching cop hats, I also like how they have armbands which are usually used to signify the officer's rank and department. And yet, their main uniforms are also distinctive in that Ai goes with a vest and skirt combo, while Aoi has kind of a long jacket and spats. This is likely meant to represent the former's more free-spirited, unrestricted nature, versus the latter's more rule-abiding, strict nature, which is often seen with these sorts of dual dynamics, and is probably what Sora and Mashiro are going to go with. We even see this on full display in just these couple of intro pages, as Ai both helps an old lady cross the street, and stops a random shroom thief. Damn, Mario, did you already burn through all of those checks you got from Illumination? However, as Aoi pointed out from her fancy car, because of course the secondary has to be loaded, what Ai was doing, while very noble, was also unnecessary, and was taking time away from more important things, like being on standby for real emergencies, or just getting to school on time. Of course, she could have given her partner a ride, but first she needed to fill out the proper paperwork. Even in this manga, those poor officers could not escape that tedium. Of course, I was tardy and had to face the wrath of their teacher, Hiroko Tachi. Though she was at least supportive when our lead Cure told her about her dream of becoming a full-fledged officer, even when the boys teased her and said that she'd be more like a dog. Like, okay, I get that dogs are a bit of a slanderous term for Japanese cops, like pigs are for American cops, but you do realize you're basically calling her a bitch, right? Still, her tardiness, plus her failing grades, meant that I needed to take some remedial classes. Okay, we're kind of overdoing it with the pink lead cliches now. Though to her credit, she did know when to put the pen down and say, screw passing grades, we gotta save the city, as they were called in by their fairy partner. Really, Colombo? Okay, this one-shot has already completely overtaken Hirogaru's Sky even before its premiere. Anyway, the two managed to sneak out just as Hiroko came back to check in on Ai. She quickly gave chase just as our heroines arrived at the crime scene, where a giant laser cannon with sunglasses was aiming down at the city. Now you see, this is what happens when y'all let the sunglasses morpher tech fall into the wrong hands. Daigoro had the activation button around his neck, so the Policure transformed to engage him, which they went into a lot of damn detail, even including roll calls. Anyway, they did all of this whilst Hiroko was watching and was now in on her student's little secret. And if that weren't bad enough, Daigoro went into shirtless mode. Now you see, if this were a Yakuza game, they'd be in serious trouble, but considering that it's more of a toy-adjacent parody, well... Still, it wouldn't just be an instant victory, as he quickly drove the two into a corner. This resulted in them recollecting how they became superheroines in the first place when they met Columbo's father, Maigret, named after Jules Maigret, a fictional French police detective. Though, I'm guessing he was only around for the first episode, as he was gunned down by a Yakuzan. Like, come on, you don't see Policure doing that to their fairy mascots, twice, oh yeah. Okay, but seriously, while I highly doubt a fairy being realistically gunned down will ever be shown in Policure, as that would first require a real gun, I do think some more modern series do stray a little too much away from the concept of death. I mean, of course, I'm not just saying off everyone, but I think it can also be used beyond just garnering some cheap sympathy for a character who we barely know, who dies, but not really thanks to a Doctor Who-esque regeneration. In this case, they're basically doing the classic Uncle Ben setup, with the wise old man passing on his strong sense of justice onto the new heroes. Which, considering how much influence Spider-Man and the works of Stan Lee ended up having on Toei from working directly with them, this really does feel like something that should be in Policure, and hell, since we're about to get a whole season exploring the themes of heroism, then I do expect some sort of scene like this in Hero Sky. A character doesn't necessarily have to die, but I do want to see the Sky-based heroine exposit about how other heroes have influenced her. Anyway, this speech ended up inspiring Hiroko, who while initially hesitant, quickly stepped in to protect her students. Her father's notebook badge that she had kept as a memento suddenly appeared and turned into plastic. Yep, she had gotten the same sort of transformation trinket as her students, and after receiving a Crescent Moon badge from Columbo, she became a Policure, even seemingly de-aging in the process. So okay, I know this is gonna sound a little crazy, but now I kind of want to see a middle-aged woman become a Policure. Stop looking at me like that. I mean, come on, it's not that far outside the realm of possibility, as not only have we had a whole team worth of older cures, with Asumi in particular being physically of legal drinking age in Japan, but we've also had a literal granny age regressed to becoming a cure again. Sure, she wasn't part of the main team, but considering how often this franchise uses age progression for their Six Rangers, which is probably what they're going to do with L later, then I see no reason why they can't go with the opposite fetish every so often. Like I said, stop looking at me like that. Not to mention, this particular scenario works on multiple levels. First, just the fact that Hiroko was holding onto her father's badge as a memento heavily suggested that he was dead, and considering that she was reacting to Maigret's fate, yeah, he likely died in the line of duty as well. Second, and kind of even more importantly, she is their teacher, so she can make a ton of excuses why the two would have to leave class all of a sudden, and would have some justification why she can't join them in all of their fights, as she would both have to cover for them, and maintain her day job. I mean, generally, superheroine doesn't pay the bills. I don't know, it just makes almost too much sense as a setup for a Sixth Ranger, to the point that I do wonder why Policure hasn't done it yet, or at least not for a main team member. Again, age really isn't a factor that much these days. Anyway, Hiroko took on the grunt, so okay, I get that these sound effects are meant to be like stomp, 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 but am I the only one who's reading them as SHAMP! 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 I mean, if y'all want to dress up like a bunch of gimps and get stepped on by an age-regressed sensei, then I won't judge. Either that, or maybe they just enjoy being whipped by her big staff thing. As we got a pretty sweet action sequence. Seriously, I love these 2-page panel spreads where the characters just muscle their way through the hordes. And again, considering that Hiroko is older and was likely trained by her cop dad, there is justification as to why she's able to take on even Daigoro beyond just the fact that this was her debut fight. Then, after an awesome one-liner where she defended her student's dreams, Hiroko smashed the cannon's button. With that, the three Policure joined together for a group finisher where they summoned an actual standard firearm that the Japanese police force use. Just say this is a mixer, and you'll be able to get away with it, until they replace it with a much worse finisher. And they defeated Daigoro with a Mahotsukai-esque finisher. Seriously, say what you want about that series, but I think we can all agree those finishers were pretty damn sweet. And with that, our tale ended with Ai and Aoi thanking Hiroko and welcoming her onto the team, who in return was gonna drag the former back to detention. However, as is so often the case, when one general goes down, another replaces them. You know, there comes a point when you can only remind yourself that something is a parody so much before you start to feel like it really should just become official. For something that's often just used as a part of a punchline in the series proper, they really went all in with this one-shot. Sure, they played up some of the common tropes and cliches of the Precure franchise, but it never felt mean-spirited, and they presented ideas that I'd actually love to see them do in the actual Precure seasons. While realistically, I don't expect them to do much more than just this one-shot, and maybe an ONA adaptation for Netflix, I do think that this was still a fun little story made by people who clearly care about this franchise. For something they could just as easily made into a tongue-in-cheek parody, especially considering that this was bonus material for a slice-of-life comedy, they took it almost shockingly seriously and incorporated many actual elements from several Precure series and more paid true to them, like the famous deadlift or just the badassery in general. Which, yeah, on that note, the action in this story was pretty damn good, especially for, as I keep saying, just bonus material. I mean, I won't say it's objectively better or worse than what the Kamikita Futago draw, as it is a very apples and oranges comparison, as they tend to focus more on the dramatic slice-of-life aspects of Precure, but yeah, sometimes I do prefer oranges. Regardless, I think what makes this one of the most affectionate of affectionate parodies is how they managed to get the heart of the Precure franchise down right, as cheesy as that may sound. Not only did they get some of the more surface-level aspects down, like the cute designs or the over-the-top nature of these villains and monsters, but I think they also really got down the strong convictions of these characters. Precure, and by extension many toy heroes, aren't just fighting the good fight because it's the right thing to do, but because they also have very strong moralities instilled within them. Whether it be from personal experiences, or like this Uncle Ben scenario, they try to act on them as best they can. While brief, we were able to see the resolve of these heroines mostly just through their actions. Ai was well-meaning and did everything she could to help others, which contrasted with Aoi's literal by-the-book tendencies. And yet, both were driven by the same goal of living up to Margaret's final wishes and ensuring that no officer would have to suffer the same fate as him. Sure, they're not the most fleshed out characters ever, but this is a one-shot, so it is impressive that they got even the basics down. Though of course, the one who got the most development was Hiroko, as from an in-universe standpoint of Way of the House Husband, this was likely the episode 17 debut of the Sixth Ranger. Again, not only do I legit love the idea of the curious teacher becoming a superheroine, but some of Hiroko's writing was just handled brilliantly, like how she stepped in right after hearing Ai's speech, implying that while she knew nothing about Margaret, her statement of living up to someone who believed in her seemed to connect with Hiroko, implying that she had similar experiences with her father, who likely met a similar fate. It's really good writing that took full advantage of the limited amount of pages they had, making for a great origin story. Would I have enjoyed a more satirical and tongue-in-cheek Precure parody? Sure. As long as it's not too mean-spirited or just being used as a vehicle for someone else's vanity project, I've never seen any issue with a little bit of a roast. But that clearly wasn't the aim here, as I think they just want to pitch an actually good anime, both to justify Miku's love for this franchise, and to show their own love for the real thing, with even getting the direct blessing of Toei themselves. And in that sense, all I can say is good job to both Scano and Ono. You two not only let Chiaki Kon indirectly make one more Precure production, but you've also at least reset the bar for the next series. And we'll be sure to keep you updated on the actual next series in the franchise, Though at the same time, we might also be traveling back to the very beginning. With January already halfway through, I guess we really should get back to working on that Futai review. What can I say? I get distracted really easily. Still look forward to it. Until then though, farewell for now my friends, and yeah, I probably should really go before the epic guide here to get here.